You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast.
You're listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. My name is Shawn Wilkie, and along with my awesome co-host, we interview the innovators every week. Ivan, please go ahead and get us started.
Hey, I'm Ivan Zach. Very excited to have Lauren Holtvoigt on our podcast today. Currently, she's the Vice President of Sales and Commercial Development and the co-founder of PetDx, a cutting-edge liquid biopsy company. Dr. Holtvoigt was previously with Elanco US as Senior Advisor of Alternative Veterinary Delivery Models. Prior, she spent time with Mars Pet Care as the Director of Research and Development of Wisdom Panel and with National Veterinary Associates as the Senior Manager of Regional Operations for the Specialty and ER Division. Lauren, welcome to the show. Thank you for finding the time.
Thank you very much. Very happy to be here.
So, we are here to talk about liquid biopsy and early cancer diagnosis in veterinary medicine. And if that is something that is taught in school right now, I feel like I'm ancient and outdated.
I would totally agree with that, by the way, Ivan.
You are not ancient and outdated, so no worries. I was in vet school 10 years ago, and we did not learn anything about genomics, especially when it came to cancer. So this is certainly a new field. Both in human medicine and now in veterinary medicine. So we're all learning together, I will say.
Well, what is it? Tell us about it. And what is the liquid biopsy?
So liquid biopsy is based on the premise that, as you might remember in your early biology classes, DNA is in all of our cells, and specifically in cancer cells, DNA is mutated. So cancer is a disease of the genome. We usually think of it as a disease of an organ, but it's actually an alteration of the genome itself. So when cancer develops, it's because of small genomic alterations that can change in just one nucleotide, or the A's, T's, C's, and G's, that cause a structural difference in the cells that make them not die or replicate too fast. And so then we get cancer. And liquid biopsy is on the premise that we can actually detect those alterations. So when cells die, which is normal through apoptosis, they go into our bloodstream to be filtered out by our liver and kidneys. That's a normal process. But what we can do through liquid biopsy is actually draw whole blood and deep sequence for those genetic alterations to detect cancer with a blood test. And this is a product that's available for humans as well. And we were able to take that technology, alter it a little bit, or I should say a lot of bit, for the canine genome, and offer the same technology to dogs.
Super cool. So you've got quite the background, really interesting. And I think you're the first DVM that we've had on the show that's vice president of sales of an organization and a co-founder. So I'm totally interested about your origin story. How did you get to today? What did that look like?
Yeah, it was definitely a pathway of twists and turns. I entered vet school wanting to be a beef veterinarian to add some strangeness to it. I spent most of my vet school in feedlots working with cattle. And then when I got to my final year of vet school, my husband said, "There's no way I'm living in any state that has feedlots, so you better choose a different path." So I actually went to horses. I showed horses my whole life and thought that was an easy transition. So after about 2 years in the horse world and a lot of on-call hours, I thought, I think I need to do something else. And my boss encouraged me, I think you should go into business, because I was meddling quite a bit in his practice and creating promotional things and new logos. And he said, I think you should look into that. So I got the opportunity to join Royal Canin in their research and development center. And that kind of opened the world to me on the animal industry as a whole and how much impact you can make in the industry level. A few years later, I had the opportunity to do an MBA. So I did that and wanted to take the full opportunity to apply what I've learned with my MBA, and was with National Veterinary Associates with their ER and specialty division. So really into the weeds on evaluating hospitals, what their value is, how they function, how we optimize that value. And that kind of just projected me straight into the business world, and I never looked back. So I still practice every 2 or 3 times a month in the clinic just to keep my head in the game, I guess. But business is really where it's at and where I make my impact. But I do think that having that DVM background with the combination of business skills offers a really special niche, I guess, to be able to market, sell, and place products in the veterinary market, because I know what veterinarians want. I know what's meaningful to them.
And so how did you come to co-found PetDx?
Good question. So there was an ad out for a stealth startup, and I didn't really know what they were doing, but they wanted a veterinarian with business background and also someone with some background in canine genetics. I had just recently left Wisdom Panel, and I thought, well, there's probably only 3 people in the country with all 3, so I'll go ahead and put my hat in the ring. And I met Daniel Grossu, who's our CEO. He's an MD who came from Illumina. I'm not sure if you ever heard of that company. They're a huge human genomics company. And he had this really compelling story. He had his own dog that had pancreatic cancer that progressed really quickly. So within 6 weeks, they threw everything at it that they could to save his dog. His dog was only, I think, 3 years old. And through that process, he was like, there has to be some better products for diagnosing cancer in dogs. We have all of these great products for humans. Why aren't they in dogs? And so with that story and his background, I thought, I know there's a market need for this. There's so many times in practice where I would get asked, doesn't my CVC Chem tell you if my dog has cancer? And I have to say, no, not really. And so I knew people are asking for this. People believe that there's already a solution to finding cancer in dogs through a blood test. And I believed that the small team we had then could make it happen. And so I jumped on full force, and I guess the rest is history.
Wow. There's 2 fascinating things here. Is your career path from a feedlot veterinarian to head of specialty hospitals in NVA to co-founding of Genome. This is just crazy. So congratulations. Very, very interesting. And, it's one thing that I do in sort of another area of my interest is researching the burnout in the profession. And we just finished a study recently, and it did show, because I had this question, is it because veterinarians don't set goals beyond the vet school? And we actually just finished another study this year, and it does show that without setting goals, people can burn out more significantly in our domain. And this is why I'm fascinated about all the entrepreneurs in our industry, how they change goals and seem to be happy people. I don't think we interviewed anybody who is burned out on this podcast, that's for sure.
Yeah, you got to keep it exciting. Keep new challenges always.
Exactly. But then so what is the practical application of this? And I'm almost annoyed with the fact that now we can test for cancer with a blood test, because every time, I'm an ER vet, so that's what I've done for a number of years. And then every time you would have a client that would come in and you're like, well, there could be a possibility of neoplasia. And then they were like, well, can you do the blood test? And, it's like when you're on a night shift and burned out as I was, it's like, well, no, you're stupid. You don't understand. You can't test cancer by blood work. And now you can. So,
Yes.
So what is that practical application? What type of cancers? How does it work? What's the concentration of those, genetic material has to be in the bloodstream to test for it? Can you give us a little bit more clinical sort of application?
Good question. So there's 2 different use cases that you can use a test like this, and one is the one that you just described. So patients that come in, we call it aid in diagnosis. Patients that come in, maybe they have non-specific signs. Maybe they have a mass in their thoracic radiographs or the abdominal ultrasound that's really hard to biopsy, or the owners don't want to biopsy it. This would be a test that you could do to confirm cancer. So those ADR dogs where you're just like, something's wrong with you, but nothing is giving me any clear indication of what it is. I suspect it's cancer, but I can't confirm it. You could use this test to aid in the diagnosis of that dog. The second way that we recommend using it is actually in screening. So we recommend, and this is something that's super new to veterinary medicine. Humans have colonoscopies, mammograms. We actually don't have any diagnostics in the veterinary world to screen for cancer. And we know that an earlier cancer diagnosis makes for a better outcome, more complete treatment, longer life, better quality of life in humans. And there's no indication that that's not the same in dogs. The sad thing is we actually don't have the research that that's the case, because we've never been able to diagnose dogs early. So this test gives you an opportunity to screen for cancer. So we recommend starting screening in all dogs at 8 years or older, and in breeds that are predisposed to cancer sooner than that. So, your golden retrievers, your boxers, labs, giant breeds, start screening early so that you can catch the cancer before the dog shows overt signs. We know by the time there's overt signs that we're catching, so that lethargy, anorexia, or visible mass, usually the cancer is spread so far that treatment becomes difficult. So those two use cases are very good ones in practice. The screening one is a little different than we're used to because we've just never had the tool to do that.
So again, fascinating. And you mentioned one interesting thing. So, you said that humans have colonoscopy and mammograms, and then there's a blood test. So I'm sure that every listener that is listening and who had colonoscopy would go, was that an option to do a blood test instead of colonoscopy? So are we talking about specific types of cancer that you can screen with this? And what, ADR, and for those that don't know, it's ain't doing right. Dog,
Yes.
I'm sure that most of the veterinarians here, they would get a laugh because they know what it is. But for those ADR patients, is it any cancer? Is it any suspicion of neoplastic process in the body? What should be the degree of that process? Is it just, couple cells start just replicating abnormally, or is it like a huge, like grapefruit-sized tumor in the chest? Like what is sort of that? How early can you detect it, and what types of cancers?
This is a test called a multi-cancer Msid test, a multi-cancer test. And so we can detect over 20 cancers, I should say 20 plus. So we're still finding cancers that we can detect. The human equivalent test was actually just released this year as well. It's called the Grail test. It's called Gallery with an I. So yes, now maybe instead of your colonoscopy, you could get a blood test. I think that's definitely coming up in the human space. But we did a very big clinical study to understand exactly how many cancers that we can detect. It was an all-comers study, which means any cancer that was diagnosed within an oncologist, we entered into the study. So common cancers present commonly, and we were able to detect over 20 within our clinical validation. So I'd say that list is still growing as we continue to get more and more cases in and are able to detect even more. But it can detect a lot of cancers, both ones that are surprising, at least to me as a clinician, and ones that are obvious. So lymphoma, hemangiosarcoma, osteosarcoma, the ones that we see every day, and I shouldn't say every day, hopefully not every day, but the ones you see often in practice are the ones that actually perform really, really well. So if you do have those splenic nodules that you're not sure of, you can do this test. Or we recently had one that was a thoracic mass that they could see on radiographs, but you weren't sure if that was because of old age, if it was fungal. And so they did this test to confirm.
Very interesting. So, Lauren, what's the most exciting thing that's going on in your organization? What gets you super jazzed up about the work that you're doing?
Oh, it's so many exciting things. First off, because this is the only cancer test that's using this technology, we're learning a ton of things. So every sample that comes in, we're learning so much about the canine genome and cancer markers within dogs. So everything that we do is kind of on the forefront of science. And so all of our R&D meetings and stuff are really exciting because we're literally discovering things every day. That's super exciting. On the clinical front, we're seeing a few veterinarians, our early adopters, really integrate this into their cancer screening programs. So usually cancer screening is a geriatric panel with x-rays. And we've had some clinicians start integrating this into their practice. And we've actually detected a few cancers early. So dogs who are completely normal, and we found variants associated with cancer in their sample, were able to offer that dog a better quality of life, early treatment, all sorts of good stuff that we're really starting to see the fruits of our labor. So dogs are able to live longer lives with their humans. And even though they're individual cases, every single one of them that comes through is just heartwarming. We hear another one every single week. And I have to say, as a veterinarian, that's probably the most exciting part.
Yeah, that's super cool. So we were chatting about just December coming up. You guys are going to be exhibiting at the Fetch San Diego event. I'll be there as well. So looking forward to meeting you in person. But
Yeah.
if our listeners want to find out more about the work that you guys are doing, how can they do that?
Yeah, take a look at our website, petdx.com. There's a lot of resources there, both about the test and some of the scientific publications that we've made so far. There's also great links about webinars. So we hold webinars all the time. We have one upcoming, both with Vet Girl and a few other groups. So you can always catch a webinar to learn more about the science. Those are all CE credited webinars. So free CE is never bad. We also will be at VMX in January. So excited to see everyone there. We hope that'll be a really big show since everyone's finally able to come out and see everyone else in person.
Yeah, that's exciting. I'll be at that show. I know we'll go there to VMX. So yeah, we'll see how many people finally come out of the COVID well, we didn't come out of the COVID, but just come out of the COVID to go to the conference. And I heard there's no COVID in Florida, according to a lot of American friends. This is fascinating. I kept thinking about how this transition from the human space to us through you and your co-founders. And I don't know if you're familiar with Ben Lewis and what he's doing in One Health. Are you connected at all? Like, I mean, this sounds like such a connection for that. Is
Yeah.
that they look for early detection cancer patients so they can do all the studies on treatment of those.
Yeah. They do very similar work with tissue samples. So they're able to look at those genetic variants with the tissue samples once they identify where the mass is or what the mass is. So we're a little bit in the continuum of care. We're a little bit more upstream, but definitely complementary products.
And so for just a general user, I don't know if this is available or not. First of all, is it now available at scale? Can any clinic go through their lab provider and basically order the test? And how much is it on average, ranging from for veterinarians to run this?
It's available in the United States and Canada. So any veterinarian can reach out. We can get them all set up. We have our own ordering platform. So once they open an account, we send them the test collection kits for free. So they can just have those on their shelves for whenever the right patient walks in the door. Those kits come equipped with everything that they'll need to pull the sample. There's specialized blood tubes in there and a prepaid shipping envelope to ship it back to us. The sample itself requires no processing, so the sample's stable for 7 days with no cooling, heating, freezing, nothing like that. So 7 days at ambient temperature, and that gives us the ability to ship from almost anywhere in the world. So once they ship it back to us, we upload the results on that platform. So if they want the test, they can reach out to us directly. We'll get them all set up.
That's amazing. Well, I mean, this is fascinating. We blew through 20 minutes, but I'm so excited about this. This is a completely new development, and I'm hoping that everybody will start adopting that into their geriatric patient protocols. What about cats?
Yes, that's actually our number one FAQ. Everyone wants the cats. We love cats at PetDx, and we're working on it. I'll just say that.
Okay. So they're not left outside of this. Excellent. Well, two questions we usually ask at the end of the show. So is there a book, TED Talk, video, or movie, something that inspired you recently that you would recommend to our listeners?
Yeah, so The Book of Joy, which is by Desmond Tutu.
Wow.
This is a philosophical book just about how bringing your own joy is possible, both in suffering, hardship, and during joyous times. So I love that book. I was actually rereading it last night. It's just a good reminder of all of the joy in the world that is possible and how to keep that outlook on life.
That's amazing.
Excellent.
Sounds like a good one. And then the last question is another innovator, somebody that you think we should interview on the show.
Yeah, and he'll probably kill me for this because I didn't ask him before I'm going to say this. But Brian Flessner, he's somebody on our clinical advisory board, and he just moved to UPenn as the clinical studies director. So he had helped us quite a bit on clinical studies, but he's always coming up with great new ideas, super enthusiastic, just all about canine cancer, and he's a medical oncologist. So great guy. I'm sure you'll hear lots of interesting things from him.
Thank you so much for listening to the Veterinary Innovation Podcast. If you want to hear about our new episodes, please follow us on any social media channel. Also, you can check out our website at veterinaryinnovationpodcast.com. See you next week.